This leads us into the Trojan War. So, sometimes in the 1200s BC, we see evidence of a conflict at Troy. According to archaeologists that have dealt with working on those sites, there has been evidence of a war that had occurred at Troy. So, although it is very, very ingrained into Greek mythology, there's a very high chance that the stories that come through about the Battle of Troy really kind of comes from something that possibly could have occurred. So the Mycenaeans fought a 10-year war against Troy. So we're kind of getting into the story now. The Mycenaeans fought a 10-year war against Troy, which is an independent city located in Anatolia. So if I scroll back here real fast, you'll see here. So here's Mycenae, and they had to cross the Aegean Sea all the way over into Anatolia, which you see over here, to get to Troy. So according to this legend, right, we have a Greek army that had besieged and destroyed Troy because the Trojan prince Paris had kidnapped Helen. She was the beautiful wife of the Greek king, and she also happened to be the daughter of Zeus. Now, the Trojan prince Paris had actually been kind of tricked into kidnapping Helen. He had seen her and fell in love with her. One of the goddesses in Greek mythology, Aphrodite, had given Paris her belt, and this belt had a very special power, and it would make people irresistible to you. So he would show up at Helen's doorstep, she would fall madly in love with him, and he took her back to Troy. The Greek king obviously didn't care for this situation and decided to go after Troy for this reason. So the Greek warrior Achilles and his enemy prince Hector of Troy, during the battle, they both die in combat. Eventually, the Greeks left and presented a large wooden horse as a gift just outside their gates. The Greeks turn around and leave, and the Trojans were like, okay, well, I suppose we'll accept this gift, and they brought it inside of their walls. And at nightfall, what happens is you have kind of the Navy SEALs of the Greek culture, right? They're actually sitting inside this horse. And when night falls, Odysseus, who is the kind of leader of this special forces group, this Greek special forces group, and his men jump out of the horse and they begin sacking Troy, eventually taking it over, and Troy was destroyed. So once again, I had mentioned about Troy. Archaeologists, historians, right? They've looked into this for so long, and they've actually found sites right in the area where many Greek historians had kind of talked about, and they believe that they had found the city of Troy. So they started questioning, okay, well, is this possible that something from Greek mythology itself, from these early stories, could it have actually happened? And there is actually, this large city that they have found. They have found charred remains. They have found destroyed buildings. So there is certainly some type of war that had occurred at this site. And it kind of fits everything that these stories had produced. So it's kind of interesting to see a kind of a Greek mythology begin to come to life. All right, Mycenaean collapse and the Dorian Age. So not long after the Trojan War, the Mycenaean civilization begins to collapse. Around 1200 BC, sea raiders attacked and burned many Mycenaean cities. And so around the same time as the Minoans, we had the collapse of the Minoan civilization, definitely around by 1200 BC. So around the same time, we see both the Minoan civilization and the Mycenaean civilizations begin to collapse, with their cultures kind of sticking around in the area. The Dorians kind of move into this war-torn countryside and begin to take over. And during this time, Greeks appear to have temporarily lost the art of writing. We have this 400-year period between 1150 and 750 BC where there's really no record of what had happened, except for some stories that eventually followed. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was the Iliad and the Odyssey. There was a great blind storyteller, and later on it was written down. But Homer was this kind of great storyteller, and he used to tell these epic poems of great battles and other Greek feats. So lacking writing during the Dorian period, which he kind of was near the end of the Dorian period there, the Greeks had learned about their history through stories. So according to these traditions, now we don't know a whole lot about this guy, but he's definitely believed to have composed his epics in his poems, celebrating these heroic deeds sometime between 750 and 700 BC. Now, the Trojan War was one of them. Right, so the Trojan War actually forms the backdrop for one of his epic poems, the Iliad. And then what happens is, they talk about Achilles and his battle to the death with the Prince Hector. And then you have his second book, which takes place, which is the Odyssey. And the Odyssey actually takes place after the Battle of Troy is finally over. Yeah, Odysseus, who is this guy that was kind of the leader of that secret night operation that was in the Trojan horse. So after his group kind of ransacks Troy and destroys it, they pack up their things and head back to Greece. And what happens is during the Odyssey is it takes place, it talks about that trip back for Odysseus, and which was a very, very long, drawn-out trip back. So the last thing I want to talk about are the Greek myths. The Greek myths actually developed a rich set of myths, or these traditional stories, about their gods. And it's very interesting because through these myths actually help the Greeks understand the mysteries, right, that they couldn't explain, the mysteries of nature and the mysteries of human passions. So what they did is to help them understand these things, they started attributing gods to human qualities such as love and hate and jealousy. And in these stories, it's very, very kind of intricate and detailed. But these gods, quarreled with each other and competed with each other constantly. And it kind of they try and explain certain morals of the stories to kind of teach their kids. One thing that kind of separated gods from men was that these gods lived forever. And some of the main ones, which I know you've probably heard of, especially the first one here, is Zeus. So Zeus is the ruler of the gods. He lives on Mount Olympus, and he lives with his wife Hera. Zeus was not a very loyal husband. All right, so he ends up bearing many, many children in Greek mythology, and always kind of going behind Hera's back. And Hera was not the friendliest person, and you would not want to anger her in any way, because she was actually the goddess of women. She looked over women. She was a goddess of marriage, and she was often jealous of Zeus's relationships with other women. So eventually she would take revenge on many of Zeus's children. So one of Zeus's children was Athena. Athena was known as the goddess of wisdom. She was Zeus's daughter, and overall his favorite child, eventually earning a place on Mount Olympus with the other major gods. So the Greeks had actually thought of Athena as the guardian of cities, and in turn named their main city after her, Athens. All right, so to end it off, I did put up a list here of the Greek gods, and some of these we might take a look at in some other assignments. So the ones in red here are actually the gods that had earned a place on Mount Olympus. The gray ones down here are some additional ones, which have just some interesting stories, but did not earn a place on Mount Olympus. And then we also have kind of these other purplish ones besides Kronos over here. which are Titans, right? So we have Atlas, Epimetheus, Prometheus, and not really a Titan, but more of a monster, right? The Cyclops. And there were many of those.